Hi, I'm Kirk Degiorgio, DJ, well, when the clubs are open, DJ, producer, and I'm here for another tutorial for Sonic Academy. And this is my first synthesizer shootout. And we have chosen for this shootout one of the most iconic synthesizers in electronic music, especially in techno, the Roland Juno 106. Now, originally, this came out in 1984, but it had a bit of a strange history because 2 years before the Juno 106, Roland introduced the Juno 6. And then just a few months after that, they introduced the Juno 60. And then 18 months later, the Juno 106. So let's go all the way back and see why Roland came out with these Juno synths in the first place and why they were so popular and why they were quite groundbreaking. Ever since someone stuck a keyboard on a synthesizer, musicians have had crazy ideas that you should be able to play polyphonically on synthesizers, not just monophonically. What most manufacturers came up with was to be able to play 6-note chords. They would stick in 6 voltage controlled oscillators, 6 voltage controlled low pass filters, 6 voltage controlled high pass filters, an envelope each for both of those, so 12 envelopes, numerous VCAs. The results being those absolute classic synthesizers such as the Yamaha CS80 or the Oberheim OB8 or Roland's own series like Jupiter 8, Prophet 5, Prophet 10s, Memory Moogs. The problem being they were quite difficult to maintain. With all those components in, they would overheat, the voices would go, it was terribly hard to keep in tune. So the synthesizer designers of the late 70s and early 80s were frantically trying to come up with an easier way to have polyphonic synthesizers made. And Roland had the thought of going for the purely digital road, but Yamaha had already snapped up FM synthesis. So they had to think again. We'd had divide down technology in the past where one single oscillator was divided down a number of times. Some of the string synthesizers, the classic string synthesizer, the Selena, used the divide down method. But Roland came up with an idea of still having 6 oscillators, but having them as chips. They would still be analog, but they'd be digitally controlled. The pitch would be controlled by a microprocessor. And this got rid of the tuning problem. Still had a problem with heat and such, but at least you'd be able to have 6 DCOs and they wouldn't go out of tune very quickly if you took them on tour and in a concert hall or something. You could pretty much rely on them. Now, having DCOs are far more accurate. You didn't have that gorgeous beating and phase relationship that true analog oscillators had. They would drift slightly and give it that richness. They noticed straight away that this was missing. So how to get around this problem? They introduced a chorus, and it's a chorus to die for. It's often held up along with the Selena chorus, which was called an ensemble. It's often held up as the ultimate synthesizer chorus. It's got 2 stages, one which is absolutely perfect, and then stage 2 if you want a bit more intensity, and this became the classic sound. So the Juno 6 was released in 1982. The pace of innovation was very fast in the early 80s, and pretty soon they realized they were going to have some patch memory, so they brought in the Juno 60, which added a certain capability for storing your own patches and of course recalling them. And still, that wasn't quite enough, so within 18 months in 1984 they came up with the Juno 106. It was still pretty much identical to the Juno 60. It had a different filter configuration that is still quite controversial and debated ad nauseum on the internet today. They chose a different integration of the chips that they used in the Juno 60, and some people believe it gives the Juno 106 a smoother sound, and some people prefer the more ballsy sound of the Juno 60. Others who have both synthesizers and are very experienced with both will tell you that's complete rubbish, and that there is probably more difference between one Juno 106 and another Juno 106 than between a Juno 60 and a Juno 106. Now, Juno 106s, it's a bit of a myth that they were quite affordable. They were about £1,000 when they came out in 1984, so to allow for inflation, that would be pretty much £3,000 today. So they were still quite expensive. Now, the reason they became very popular in techno in the mid to late 80s in particular with Chicago House is because after about 4 or 5, 6, 7 years, some of the filter amp chips started to die, and you could get them fairly cheap. And what a lot of the more naive synthesizer users of that era, shall we say, what they were doing, they were buying what they thought were bargains, but then you got down to it and it only had a certain amount of these 6 voices that were actually working properly. But regardless, some classic house music from the likes of Mr. Fingers was made with Junos, and it became a staple from the early techno and going into the IDM genre, and it is still immensely popular today, hence the soft synth emulations. And what sparked this was another entry into the market of a Juno 106 emulation purporting to be the best so far, and that is from Cherry Audio, and it's a very reasonable price. I think it's about 20 quid or something, and $25, which is just incredible. And you also now have the ability to use Roland's own modern digital emulation of the Juno 106 using their cloud subscription. We're going to be putting that up against TAL U-NO-LX, which is actually a Juno 60 emulation, but seeing as they're so close together, we thought it would be good to include that in the shootout as well. And finally, we're going to see how well Sonic Academy's Anasynth can do, putting it in a kind of similar architecture to the Juno synths. So this is the Juno 106 Juno 60 Ana shootout. My name's Kirk Degiorgio. This is Sonic Academy.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate the support from you guys. If you liked this video, then smash that like button, and if you want to be notified about new content, hit the subscribe and the bell notifications. Peace!